Don't even think about dragging that cheap luggage across my hardwood floors, Elena. You'll ruin the finish. Those were the first words out of my mother's mouth. Not a hug, not a tear of joy after I'd traveled across half the country to be here for what she described as a dire family emergency. Instead, Eleanor stood in the grand foyer of her sprawling Winnetka estate, manicured fingers gripping a glass of chilled white wine, looking at my battered suitcase like it was a pile of trash. Take that eyesore to the back entry. Now, she snapped, her voice as cold as the marble under my feet. We have high-profile guests arriving this evening, and I won't have your clutter tarnishing the aesthetic I've worked so hard to maintain. I stood there, frozen in the doorway of my childhood home, my hand squeezing the handle of my bag so tight my knuckles went white. My name is Elena, I'm 32 years old, and for the last 7 years I've carved out a career as a high-level art director at a powerhouse agency in Chicago. I left this house to escape the very woman standing in front of me, but to Eleanor, I'm still just the disappointing daughter who didn't marry into old money. Before I reveal the shocking trap she'd actually set for me, do me a favor. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from today. And if you've ever been manipulated into returning to a toxic home by a parent who knows exactly which buttons to push, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, this story is about to go from a family drama to a full-blown legal war. Less than 48 hours ago, I was in my glass-walled office overlooking the skyline when my phone buzzed. It was Eleanor, sobbing so violently I could barely make out the words. Your father. Elena, it's his heart, she'd gasped between those well-practiced, performative wails. He's so fragile. The specialists are terrified. He keeps calling your name. Please, you have to come home. I dropped everything. I cancelled 4 crucial strategy meetings. I didn't even pack a proper bag. Just threw the basics into whatever suitcase was closest. When I asked her to handle my flight because my own liquidity was tied up in a major investment closing, she booked me a middle seat on a budget carrier. 5 hours. 5 hours of being sandwiched between strangers, breathing recycled air, and feeling the dread sink into my bones. I didn't complain once. I thought I was coming home to say a final goodbye to my father. I pulled up to the Winnetka mansion in an Uber because Eleanor claimed she was too emotionally drained to drive. The house sat there, a monument to a lifestyle they couldn't actually afford: 8 bedrooms, a custom limestone facade, and columns that looked like they belonged on a federal building. As I dragged my bag up the long brick drive, my stomach was in knots. I expected a house of mourning. I expected medical equipment and hushed whispers. Instead, when I opened that heavy oak door, the air smelled like expensive lavender candles and lemon wax. There were no nurses. No oxygen tanks. Just Eleanor in a silk blouse, looking annoyed that I'd tracked in a bit of dust. Is he at the clinic? I asked, my voice thin and raspy from the flight. Is he upstairs in bed? Eleanor took a methodical sip of her wine, her gaze scanning me from my frantic expression down to my worn-out sneakers with a look of absolute disdain. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Elena. He's out on the green. He felt a bit sluggish yesterday, so he rested, but he's perfectly fine now. Honestly, you act like the world is collapsing just because I wanted the family under one roof for once. I felt the color leave my face. I had flown across several states in a blind panic. I had terrified myself for hours, imagining a funeral, and he was out playing 18 holes. You told me it was an emergency, I whispered, my shock hardening into a sharp, crystalline anger. You said the doctors were gravely concerned. Well, the specialist said his cholesterol is trending up. Eleanor shrugged, turning her back to me to inspect her reflection in the foyer's gilded mirror. That is quite concerning, isn't it? Now, get that bag out of my sight. I told you the casters are marked, and I just had the imported hardwood refinished. You'll be in the apartment above the garage. Your old bedroom is being used for storage. She walked away, her heels clicking like a metronome against the wood, leaving me standing there with my battered suitcase and the realization that I had walked straight into a cage. But what Eleanor failed to see as she strutted away was that the Elena who left 7 years ago was not the woman standing in her hallway today. I wasn't a scared child anymore. I was a strategist who had just closed a deal worth more than this entire Winnetka mansion. And I wasn't going to be the family's doormat. I dragged my bag up the narrow stairs and dropped it in the garage unit, which smelled of cold oil and neglect. I didn't even unpack. I washed my face in the tiny, rusted sink, stared at my reflection, and marched back to the main house. I needed the truth. I needed to know why I'd been lured here if my father was healthy enough to chase golf balls. Walking into the sunroom was like entering a bad reality TV pilot. My brother Julian was preening in front of the windows in neon swim trunks, while his wife Brooke sat on the white leather sofa, adjusting the gold hardware on a designer bikini. They looked expensive, polished, and completely unbothered by my arrival. "Oh, look who finally made an appearance," Julian said, not even turning his head from his reflection. "How was the flight? I heard the cheap seats are a total nightmare these days." I ignored the jab and turned to my mother, who was now perched in her armchair, scrolling through her tablet. "Mom, we need to talk. You said Dad was dying. You said I had to come home immediately." Eleanor didn't even glance up from her screen. She simply reached onto the side table, picked up a thick, stapled packet of papers, and tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy, ominous thud. "Here is your itinerary for the week," she said with a chilling casualness. I stared at the papers. It wasn't just a list. It was a meticulous, color-coded spreadsheet. 6 a.m., breakfast for Noah, Mason, and Chloe. 8 a.m., drop-off at elite swim camp. Noon, pickup. 2 p.m., advanced soccer practice. It went on and on, every minute of my life accounted for. "What on earth is this?" I asked, picking up the packet. "Your brother, Brooke, your father, and I are heading to Street Bart's in the morning," Eleanor announced, as if she were merely commenting on a slight shift in the weather. "We've decided we need a family reset. All this supposed stress with your father's health scare. It's been absolutely exhausting for us. We need time to heal. Since you're here anyway, and quite frankly doing nothing else, you are going to babysit the children." I felt my jaw drop. "You want me to babysit for a week while you lounge at a 5-star resort? You lied to me just to get me here to be unpaid labor?" "Not babysit, Elena. Watch your nieces and nephew. It's family duty," she snapped. "Besides, it's the very least you can do after being absent and ungrateful for so long." "I cannot do that," I said, my voice rising. "I have a real job. I have multi-million-dollar closings. I flew here because I thought my father was on his deathbed. I have to get back to my life." Julian let out a loud, derisive scoff. He finally turned around, acknowledging me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "Please, Elena. We all know what you actually do. You're some glorified assistant fetching lattes in Chicago, pretending to be a big shot in a tall building. You probably make a pittance. Consider this a real vacation. You get to stay in a mansion, eat organic food, and use a heated pool for free. You should be thanking us for rescuing you from your tiny, cramped apartment for a week." Brooke giggled, hiding her mouth behind a manicured hand. "Yeah, Elena, relax. The kids are easy. Just don't let them have any sugar after 5 p.m. Their schedules are in the itinerary." I looked at them. My brother, the perpetual failure who thought I was a joke. My mother, who viewed me as nothing more than a tool. They had no idea I was the one who negotiated the merger they read about in the papers. "I am not staying," I said firmly, tossing the schedule back onto the table. Eleanor stood up, her eyes flashing with a dangerous icy fire. "You are staying, Elena. I've already paid for the flights and the villa. The nanny is on her own vacation. If you leave, you are abandoning this family in a crisis. Don't be so incredibly selfish. For once in your life, be useful." The word useful hung in the air like a physical slap. I looked at Julian, still smirking. I looked at the schedule that reduced my career to domestic servitude. They thought they had me trapped. "Fine," I said, keeping my voice deceptively flat. "Go to Street Bart's. I will handle things here." Julian laughed, clapping his hands. "See, Mom? I told you she'd cave. She just needed a reminder of where she belongs." I smiled a tight, dangerous smile. "Enjoy your flight, Julian. I hope it's everything you deserve." Just as I was reeling from the sheer audacity of being forced to babysit while they sipped cocktails in the Caribbean, my sister-in-law, Brooke, floated toward me. She moved with that practiced, effortless grace that only belongs to people who have never spent a single day performing manual labor. In her hands, she held a heavy, laminated binder that was thick enough to be a Supreme Court brief. She shoved it into my chest with enough force to make me stumble, forcing me to drop my designer tote just to catch it. "Here are the dietary non-negotiables for the little ones," she chirped, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension that made my skin crawl. It's all very straightforward, really. Noah is strictly gluten-free and nightshade-free. Mason only drinks alkaline water with a pH of 9.2 or higher, and don't even think about trying to fool him with tap water, Elena, because his palate is far too refined. And Chloe is on a probiotic detox this week. That means absolutely no processed sugars, no red dye 40, and zero dairy. If you sneak them even a single packaged cracker, I'll know the moment we return because their complexions will flare up immediately. I stared at the binder. It was color-coded with meticulous tabs. It wasn't a care guide. It was a manifesto of insanity. Brooke stepped even closer, encroaching on my personal space until the scent of her expensive, musky perfume was suffocating. She reached out a hand as if to touch my hair, which I had spent 4 hours having styled into intricate, protective braids for the flight. Then, she recoiled with a theatrical grimace, as if I were carrying something contagious. Actually, it's probably a blessing you're staying behind, she whispered loudly. That hairstyle is a bit aggressive for the crowd at the Street Barts gala we're attending. Don't you think it sends a very specific, urban message? It wouldn't really mesh with the high society aesthetic of the resort. Hidden away here in the estate is definitely the better choice for everyone. You'd just feel so out of place trying to blend in looking like that. My blood turned to liquid fire. I wanted to scream that this aggressive style had been the centerpiece of a global campaign I directed for a Fortune 500 company last month. I wanted to tell her that I earned more in a quarter than her husband did in a year. But I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. Suddenly, the French doors burst open, and the noise level in the room exploded. Noah, Mason, and Chloe stormed in like a Category 5 hurricane. They were 7, 5, and 4 years old and completely, utterly feral. Noah was screaming about a level in a video game while clutching a heavy, metal die-cast truck. He saw me, a stranger in his domain, and without a second's hesitation, he hurled the truck directly at my face. It struck my collarbone with a sickening crack. I winced, my hand flying to the spot where a deep purple bruise was already beginning to bloom. Julian didn't scold his son. He didn't even ask if I was okay. He just chuckled, leaning against the wall with a protein shake. Watch the aim, buddy. Don't get dirt on Auntie Elena's shirt. That looks like a bargain bin special from last season. If you ruin it, she probably can't afford to replace it until her next tiny paycheck. It's polyester, isn't it, Elena? Highly flammable. Be careful, kids, you don't want to stand too close to cheap fabric. I looked down at my shirt. It was 100% hand-spun silk tailored in Milan. I looked at the binder of ridiculous demands. I looked at Brooke's smug grin and Julian's unearned arrogance. They thought I was their servant. They thought I was broke. No problem, Brooke, I said, my voice flat and devoid of the volcanic rage burning inside me. I'll follow your itinerary to the letter. Brooke clapped her hands, delighted. Wonderful. We're leaving at 5 a.m. sharp. Don't be late waking them up. As they walked away, laughing about my urban hair and my cheap clothes, I opened the binder. I wasn't just going to watch their children. I was going to document every single second of their parental neglect. And while they were gone, I was going to find out exactly how much debt my brother was drowning in. Because people this obsessed with looking rich usually have the most to hide. The walk back to the garage apartment felt different this time. The anxiety that had gripped me for 48 hours, the soul-crushing fear that I would lose my father before I could say goodbye had evaporated completely, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity that sharpened every sense. I wasn't a daughter returning to the fold. I was a mark. I was a resource to be exploited because they assumed my time, my career, and my life had zero value compared to theirs. They needed me to be the failure they mocked, because it made Julian's unearned success shine brighter by comparison. Julian just raised capital, Eleanor had whispered with such pride. Virtual investment on paper. Having spent a decade in the boardrooms of Chicago, I knew exactly what that meant in Julian speak. My brother had been chasing get-rich-quick schemes since he was 18. He tried dropshipping, he tried a crypto mining rig in the basement that nearly burned the house down, and he tried being a lifestyle influencer. If he had actually secured legitimate venture capital, he wouldn't be jetting off to Street Barts to celebrate. He would be in a room with 12 lawyers and 3 auditors, signing his life away. You don't blow money on a luxury villa the second a term sheet is signed unless you're desperately trying to project an image of wealth you don't actually possess. They were broke, or dangerously close to it. The realization hit me as I climbed the rickety stairs to the garage. The refinished hardwood Eleanor was so worried about, the obsession with my urban hair, the frantic need to look like royalty for their street. Bart's investors. It all smelled of absolute desperation. They were leveraging every last cent on Julian's latest fantasy, and they needed me to cover the domestic gaps because they literally couldn't afford the hired help anymore. I sat on the edge of the lumpy, thin mattress in the guest room and looked at the itinerary Eleanor had shoved at me. Drop-offs, pickups, meal plans, alkaline water requirements. It wasn't a schedule. It was a prison sentence designed to keep me too busy and distracted to notice the rot. They expected the Elena who left 7 years ago, the one who cried when they criticized her clothes. But that girl was dead. I pulled out my encrypted laptop and logged into my secure server. I sent a quick memo to my team in Chicago telling them I'd be working remotely and to clear my schedule of everything but the most critical calls. Then, I opened a new file titled, Walker Family Audit. If I was going to be the caretaker of this estate for a week, I was going to take care of everything. I was going to follow Brooke's ridiculous gluten-free binder to the letter so they couldn't fault me. I would be the perfect daughter. But while the children were at swim camp and soccer practice, I was going to do some deep-sea diving into their records. I wanted to see the paperwork for Julian's investment. I wanted to see the mortgage statements for this Winnetka mansion. I wanted to know exactly how deep the debt went. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. Don't forget to lay out Mason's outfit for tomorrow. And make sure you're up by 5:30 a.m. to make a hot breakfast. No cereal. Brooke says the sugar makes them hyper. No thank you. No apology for the manipulation. Just orders. I typed back a single thumbs up emoji. Let them fly to Street Bart's. No was now was time. No was now was now. Let them drink their overpriced cocktails and pretend to be masters of the universe. When they came back, they weren't going to find the obedient servant they left behind. They were going to find the CEO of their reality check. And I had a feeling their balance sheet was going to be written in blood. The dining room smelled of rosemary and roasted lamb, but I wasn't eating. I was standing by the sideboard, holding a heavy porcelain gravy boat, while my mother rang a tiny crystal bell she kept by her water glass, a relic of a tradition she clung to as if we still had a full staff. Elena, the sauce is getting cold, Eleanor snapped, not even bothering to look at me. Bring it over and be careful. This tablecloth is heirloom Belgian linen, and if you stain it, you'll be paying for the professional dry cleaning out of your allowance or whatever pittance you earn in Chicago. I walked around the table, serving my family like a hired hand. My place setting was empty. Eleanor had told me earlier there wasn't enough lamb for 5, so I could make myself a sandwich in the kitchen after they were finished. I poured the sauce over Julian's plate. He didn't say thank you. He didn't even shift his elbows to make room for me. He just kept talking about the resort in Street Bart's. The villa has a private chef and a vanishing edge pool that looks right over the ocean, he bragged, stuffing a forkful of potatoes into his mouth. And the concierge said they're stocking the bar with rare Blue Label. We're going to live like kings. I paused, the gravy boat hovering over his plate. That sounds incredibly expensive, Julian. First-class tickets for 5 people, a private estate with staff. That has to be at least $75,000 for just 7 days. Julian chewed loudly and swallowed before turning to look at me with a smirk that was equal parts pity and disgust. He waved his fork at me as if shooing away a fly. You always worry about the price tag, Elena. That's why you'll always be poor. That's the difference between an employee mindset and a founder mindset. You hoard pennies. I leverage capital. This is investor money. We're celebrating a successful seed round. You wouldn't understand the world of high finance living on your assistant's salary. Just make sure you don't burn the house down while we're gone. Brooke giggled, sipping her wine. Yeah, Elena, relax. Try not to break anything. We don't want to come back to a disaster. I set the gravy boat down on the table with a soft, dangerous clink. The sound cut through their laughter. I looked Julian directly in the eyes. He thought he saw submission. He didn't see the predator calculating the kill. You're right, Julian, I said, my voice smooth and cool like polished glass. I don't understand your world. But don't worry about the house. Go to Street Bart's. Enjoy your investor money. Have the time of your life. I stepped back, my hands clasped behind my back. I'll stay here and handle it all. The next morning, Julian was a whirlwind of incompetence, frantic for his phone. I found it in the kitchen. As I reached for it, the screen lit up. A push alert from a banking app. Transaction approved, $25,000. Merchant, Elite Travel Agency. Card. Centurion card ending in 411. My hand froze. 411. My number. The black card I'd earned after my first 7-figure contract. This wasn't just a loan. It was identity theft. A massive federal crime. They were stealing my money to mock me. Julian burst in. Elena, the phone. Give it. I handed it over, my face a mask of indifference. Here you go, Julian. Wouldn't want you to miss your flight. He snatched it and ran out. I watched them leave, knowing that by the time they landed, the bill would finally be due. The silence in the Winnetka mansion was heavy, absolute, and suffocating. Now that the hurricane of Julian's incompetence and my mother's vanity had finally departed for the airport, the house felt less like a home and more like a museum of high-end deception. I didn't head to the kitchen to start on the children's itinerary. Instead, I went straight to Eleanor's private study, a room she called her sanctuary, filled with porcelain trinkets and the cloying, overbearing scent of lavender potpourri. I sat at her antique mahogany desk and began to dig. It didn't take long to find the debris of their financial ruin. Tucked inside a crystal organizer were stacks of past due notices for the estate's property taxes, a final warning from the country club, and a repossession threat for the SUV Julian loved to pose in. They weren't just struggling. They were drowning in a sea of red ink. Then I found the smoking gun. Beneath a pile of luxury car brochures was a thick, white envelope from the bank. It was addressed to me, Miss Elena Walker. The seal had been sliced open with surgical precision. Inside, the Centurion card carrier was empty, but stuck to the back was a small, yellow post-it note in Eleanor's sharp, angular handwriting. Julian, use this for the street Bart's trip. She's got millions in Chicago, she won't even notice a few thousand missing. Besides, she owes us for the way we raised her. Consider it a family dividend. I stared at that note until my vision blurred with a cold, focused fury. It wasn't just Julian's desperation. It was a sanctioned, mother-approved identity theft. Eleanor hadn't just watched her son steal. She had been the architect, opening my private mail and handing him the weapon. But there was more. I opened a separate file Julian had left on the desk, titled Project Phoenix. It was a pending transaction with a predatory firm called High Stakes Liquidation. Julian was attempting to take out a $500,000 hard money loan by using this house as collateral. He had forged our parents' signatures on the deed, claiming they owned the estate free and clear. I let out a low, bitter laugh that echoed through the empty room. There was one massive flaw in Julian's plan. A detail that was about to turn his fraud into a prison sentence. My parents didn't own this house. I did. 5 years ago, when the bank was days away from a foreclosure that would have put them on the street, I had stepped in. I used my first major bonus to establish a blind LLC called Aegis Holdings. I bought the bad debt, paid off the arrears, and took the title myself. I let them live here rent-free, paying the taxes and the insurance, all while they mocked me for living in a modest Chicago condo. I looked at the notary appointment Julian had scheduled for Monday morning to finalize the loan. He was trying to sell my property out from under me to a group of loan sharks. My thumb hovered over my phone. It was time to initiate a total liquidation of their delusions. Monday wasn't going to be a payday for Julian. It was going to be the day I served the final eviction notice to the family that thought I was just the help. The heavy oak door slammed shut with a finality that made the crystal chandelier in the foyer rattle. The sudden, violent noise made little Chloe jump, and the sniffling from the 3 children abandoned in their own homes stopped instantly, replaced by wide-eyed, trembling confusion. They stood there in their expensive, organic cotton outfits, clutching their tablets, waiting for the frazzled aunt to offer them a gluten-free snack or a distraction. They were waiting for the pushover they'd been promised. I walked past them without a word. I didn't offer a hug or a lie about how soon their parents would be back. I walked straight to the marble island in the kitchen, my heels clicking a sharp, military rhythm on the hardwood. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled until I found the number I'd swiped from Brooke's private contact list. It was labeled Mother. Margot. The matriarch of the dynasty on the other side of this mess, a woman who valued social standing even more than Eleanor. I pressed call and put it on speaker. It rang 4 times before a sharp, impatient voice answered. Hello? Who is this? Hello, Margot. This is Elena Walker, Julian's sister. There was a pause, heavy with practiced disdain. Elena? I thought you were hiding away in Chicago. Why are you calling me on a Saturday morning? I'm calling to inform you of a situation regarding your grandchildren, I said, my voice cool and professional, as if I were reporting a hostile takeover. Your daughter, Brooke, and my brother have just left the country. They are currently en route to St. Bart's for a luxury vacation. I know that, Elena. Brooke mentioned a business retreat. They deserve a break. What does this have to do with you? My point, Margot, is that they have left Noah, Mason, and Chloe here at the estate. Alone. Alone? What do you mean? You're there, aren't you? I am here as a witness, not a guardian, I corrected. I never agreed to this itinerary. I have a global agency to run, and I am vacating the premises in exactly 60 minutes. Brooke failed to secure any legal childcare before fleeing the jurisdiction. In the eyes of the law, Margot, that is criminal abandonment. You are their aunt. Margot snapped, her voice rising an octave. You can't just leave. That's family. You stay there until they get back. No. The word was absolute. I am not a babysit service, Margot. I was lured here under false pretenses. I am leaving now. You have 2 choices. Choice A, you get in your car right now and come pick up your grandchildren. Choice B, when I walk out this door in 59 minutes, I call Child Protective Services and report 3 minors abandoned by parents who fled to the Caribbean. I will have the police meet the social workers here, and I will provide them with Brooke's flight number so they can be detained for neglect the moment they touch down. That's a federal crime trail they won't be able to scrub. There was a strangled, gasping sound on the other end. You wouldn't dare. That would destroy Brooke's reputation in the community. You have 58 minutes, Margot. The gate code is 5500. I suggest you drive fast. I hung up. I looked at the kids. They were frozen. Get your bags, I said. Grandma Margot is coming. You're going to stay with her. Removing them was a tactical necessity. I couldn't dismantle Julian's life with witnesses in the house. And more importantly, this was a strategic nuclear strike. Brooke wanted the world to see her as the perfect mother. By forcing her own mother to rescue her abandoned kids, I was burning that narrative to the ground before she even ordered her first drink on the beach. The air in the lobby of LeBlanc Street Bart's smelled of salt air and astronomical wealth. It was a tropical fortress where the ultra-rich came to hide from reality. Julian walked into the sanctuary like he had built it himself. He was wearing designer sunglasses indoors, his linen shirt unbuttoned to his chest, radiating a mixture of jet lag and arrogance. Brooke was right behind him, her phone out, filming a slow-motion sweep of the ocean view for her followers, while Eleanor fanned herself with a travel brochure, looking at a nearby family in t-shirts with pure disgust. They looked like they had arrived. Julian marched to the reception desk, cutting off an elderly couple mid-sentence. He slapped his wallet onto the polished stone surface. Walker, he barked, loud enough for the valets outside to hear. The presidential estate. We have a 5-night booking, and I want a bottle of vintage Ace of Spades sent to the terrace immediately. The flight was appalling, and I need a drink. The receptionist, a man with a name tag that gleamed under the chandeliers, offered a professional smile. Welcome, Mr. Walker. One moment while I pull up your file. Julian drummed his fingers on the counter, winking at Brooke. Here it is, the clerk said. The oceanfront villa. The total for the stay, including the security deposit, comes to $42,500. I just need a card for the incidentals and the room charge. Julian reached into his wallet and pulled out the heavy, matte black titanium Centurion card. He held it between 2 fingers, letting the light hit the metal before dropping it onto the counter. Put it on the black card, Julian said with a smirk. And leave the line open. We plan on making a dent in your cellar. The clerk slid the card into the reader. The machine hummed. Then, it emitted a harsh, dissonant beep. The clerk tried again. Another beep. Longer. Louder. Julian's smirk faltered. What's the holdup? It's a black card. It has no limit. I'm sorry, sir, The clerk whispered. The card has been declined. The terminal says, confiscate card. Contact authorities. Julian slammed his hand on the marble. Your machine is broken. Try it again. Sir, the bank has flagged this as an active case of identity theft and a federal crime, the clerk said, his voice turning ice-cold. Local law enforcement and a liaison for the FBI are already in the building. Suddenly, the lobby doors swung open. 4 officers and 2 men in dark suits marched toward the desk. Julian tried to run, but his heels slid on the marble. Within seconds, he was pinned against the reception counter, his designer sunglasses flying across the floor. Julian Walker, you are being detained for multiple counts of federal crime, including wire fraud and theft, an officer announced. 4,000 miles away, I sat in my quiet Winnetka study, sipping a glass of wine and watching the red dot of Julian's phone stop moving at the police station on my tracking app. The itinerary was finally complete. The Uber driver didn't even stay to watch the fallout. He popped the trunk, let their designer trunks tumble onto the curb, and sped away, leaving the remnants of the Walker dynasty standing in the suffocating Illinois humidity. They turned toward the mansion, expecting the cool embrace of air conditioning and a place to hide their shame. Instead, they found a graveyard of their own vanity. The pristine lawn that Eleanor had prioritized over my own well-being was now a chaotic sea of cardboard boxes and furniture wrapped in industrial plastic. It was a classic sheriff's eviction set out for the world to see. Eleanor froze, her hand flying to her throat to stifle a scream that wouldn't come. Her legs finally gave out, and she sank onto a suitcase, staring at her life scattered across the grass. Her antique vanity sat next to a fire hydrant. Her collection of porcelain figurines was stacked precariously in crates near the mailbox. It looked like a yard sale for the desperate. My father walked slowly toward the front door, his hand trembling so violently he dropped his key ring twice before reaching the lock. He tried to insert the key. It slid in halfway and stopped. The lock was new, shiny, and impenetrable. Taped to the heavy oak at eye level was a bright orange document, a writ of possession issued by the Fulton County Sheriff. Eviction, Eleanor whispered from the curb. We've been cast out. I stepped out onto the porch, the transition from the cool interior to the heat feeling like a victory lap. I was wearing a structured black blazer, and the Rolex glinting on my wrist. I looked down at them, my family huddled by their boxes like refugees from a life they could no longer afford. Eleanor looked up, her eyes widening. She didn't see the shuffling assistant she'd bullied for years. She saw a stranger who radiated absolute power. This is my property, she screamed, her entitlement surging back. You cannot lock me out of my own home. Your home? I repeated, my voice cool and echoing off the stone. That's a fascinating theory. But according to the registry, this estate belongs to Aegis Holdings, and it has for 5 years. I am the sole proprietor of that firm. When you were facing foreclosure, I didn't just help, I bought the title. I let you live here rent-free, and in return, you harbored a criminal who tried to use my house as collateral for a predatory liquidation loan. That's a material breach. You aren't being kicked out because I'm cruel. You're out because you tried to rob the landlord. The most profound lesson from this is that true power doesn't need to scream. The Walkers built their world on optics and debt, conflating my silence with weakness. They forgot that the person holding the safety net also has the power to pull it away. I'm heading to the airport now. I'm flying to Street Barts to stay in that presidential villa. I bought the resort compound this morning. I thought it would be a nice addition to my portfolio. Good luck with the Section 8 housing application, Dad. I hear the wait is 2 years.